What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over tips for Zero Build Endgame. Some of this will apply to build mode, but I'm going to be focusing mainly on Zero Build in this video, and I'm going to go over tips and how I like to play Endgame and just some things I kind of wish I knew or would kind of tell myself if I was starting out with BRs now. If you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and comment down below what aspect of the game you feel like you're weakest at, whether it's early game, mid game, or end game. Let me know down in the comments below. So I think the biggest thing and the most important thing if you do want to do better in game and win more games in Fortnite is to get comfortable fighting. And I've talked about this in several videos, but when a new player gets on a BR or just starts playing a BR for the first time, odds are they probably want to win, because that's the whole point of a Battle Royale, you know? We'll let people get on them and they want to get wins. But because of this, when new players kind of just first start playing, they tend to play more passive and to avoid conflict, because that is the easiest route to get a win. But because of that, they don't necessarily get comfortable fighting, and then when it does come down to endgame, they really aren't that comfortable fighting, and they're going to throw those fights, especially because most people are going to be nervous in game. You know, most people, they're not used to that, and it is like an adrenaline rush once you get to endgame. So if you're not used to being endgame and you're not used to fighting and you're not confident fighting and you really want to get that win, I feel like you're prone to messing up. So I feel like the baseline of being good at the game and consistently winning is just to get good at fighting. If you want to hide and kind of fluke out some wins every now and then, it can work occasionally, but if you want to consistently be able to win games, being comfortable playing the game and comfortable taking fights and confident taking fights is going to go a long way, because not only are you going to be better at fighting, you're going to be more confident, and that is going to lead to those end-game nerves being less of a thing. I don't really have any advice as far as like being nervous or being stressed end-game. I feel like it's just something you kind of get used to the more you play and the more time you've put in the game. Another thing that kind of makes endgame hard for a lot of people is not only that stress, but it's oftentimes the area of the game that a lot of people have the least amount of experience with, because that just makes sense. You know, you have to make it in game. You have to invest 15 to almost 20 minutes into a game just to even make it in game. And a lot of people die before then. So just play the game more. The more you play, the more experience you'll have in those situations and the better you'll get. I feel like another big thing that a lot of people struggle with is because they're just playing to win, they just kind of try to cheese the early and mid game by avoiding doing anything. They just kind of want to make it in game. And another reason why I don't think that's very good is because you might not necessarily get the loot that you need to win the game. And whether this, I'm not necessarily talking about weapon rarity. Like, sure, it would be nice to have all gold weapons, but you at least want to have the items that you want to use. You know, for me personally, my favorite loadout right now is Prime Shotgun, Hammer AR, Goo Gun or Sniper Rifle, depending on what I want to use, Chug Splashes, and then Shockwaves. So from the early and mid game, I'm trying to accumulate those items and make it to endgame with those items. If I end up using all of my shockwaves and not getting them back at some point, I'm usually trying to like rotate to a vault or hit up the NPC that sells them. And then same thing for heals. You want to have the items that you want to have when it comes down to endgame. So if you loot like one shambles location and then kind of just spend the entire game hiding, the odds of you getting those items aren't that big. And if you don't have what you like using and what you're comfortable fighting with when it comes to endgame, you can still win sometimes for sure, but that's less likely than if you have the things that you are comfortable with. So just keep that in mind while you're playing the game. If you're low on heals, try to get heals. If you're low on mobility, try to get mobility. If you're someone that really wants to use like the porta bunker or something, you got to find those. Hollow chests and vaults are really good sources of loot if you're able to get the keys, as well as just playing out and looting your location. And the saplings are back in the game, which does make it much easier to get loot for like some of those locations that don't have as much loot. So those two things aside, those had kind of nothing to do with endgame, but I feel like if you're comfortable fighting and you have the items that you enjoy using, you're going to go into endgame in a much better spot. Now, every game is different. Some games you won't have the ideal stuff. Sometimes you have to burn your heals early. Sometimes you have to burn your mobility early. It is what it is. But if you're able to get the items that you enjoy using, you're going to put yourself in the best chance to win the game. And each game is different. That's another thing that I feel like a lot of people struggle with. BRs, I feel like the biggest and most important skill in addition to fighting is just situational decision making, and that is very true with endgame. Every zone is different, every situation is different, how the other players are playing is different. If there's like vehicles in play, if there's porta bunkers in play, if you're in like a very vertical location like Rave Cave, every game is different. So you need to be able to adapt and kind of change up what you're doing to fit the game that's currently happening. You know, if you have a zone that's closing on a mountain, you might want to control that. Alternatively, you might not want to control it if the lobby is really populated, because you're more likely to get focused. So keep those things in mind. Don't feel like you have to play one set way all the time. Kind of take in how the game is going, where zone is, how many people are alive. If you're playing a team game mode, how many teams are alive is a very big deal. And you can actually see this on the sidebar when you open up the map. There's like the thing on the left side that'll say how many teams there are, and that is huge information. So be willing to adjust and change how you're going to play depending on like how the game is. You know, lots of zones play different, and you just need to take that into mind and consider it, and don't be so like stuck in your ways of how you're going to play the game, you know? I feel like being decisive is another huge thing. I notice this a lot when I make my spectating videos, is that so many people are not very decisive in game and they don't really know what they want to do. And I feel like this comes down to what we were talking about before, about people being stressed and being nervous in game. Because they're so stressed or nervous, they second guess themselves a lot, and then they kind of end up doing nothing instead of doing something. So I feel like being decisive is almost always better than kind of half committing to something and then going back on it, you know? If you thought about like running to behind a piece of cover and then you ran halfway and then ran back, that was just a complete waste of time and a huge risk. So I feel like being decisive, oftentimes the wrong play will work if you commit to it hard enough. And this is another big aspect in team game modes. I mostly play solos, but if you and your team are on just like completely different ends of the spectrum and you're like very decisive and they aren't, or vice versa, just like playing together and playing to help each other is much better than just kind of half doing one thing or the other. So be decisive, I think, and learn from your mistakes. Like I said, every game is different, and the only real way that you're going to learn what is or isn't the wrong play, because the game is so situational, is just by playing the game and seeing what works for you. I think the most important thing for in-game in general, though, and this applies to build mode as well, is just consistently putting yourself in the best spot to win the game. You know, if there's a player camping in a house and they're not going to get zone, and you could either kind of wait them out because they're going to have to come to you, or run across the field and get to them, you should wait them out and then just eventually let the storm make you win the game. And that was a very like obvious example. Everyone could come up with that, but you can apply that to everything. Just consistently put yourself in the safest position, in the best position to win the game. And this doesn't always mean just hiding. It could be a position of advantage. It could be like taking advantage of a porta bunker, taking advantage of good cover. I feel like a lot of people, because they're stressed and nervous, they feel like they need to overextend and try to just end every fight as soon as possible. But if you play the long game and you play to win in the long run, and you are consistently putting yourself in the better positions and zone, you will end up winning the game, whether that's high ground, whether that's good cover, porta bunkers. There's so many different aspects of like what could constitute a good spot in zone. But those are oftentimes the things. And when it comes to endgame, especially in Zero Build, build mode has this as well, but I think this is the number one tip I would give to people for endgame in Zero Build, is just be very mindful of third parties. The player that third parties endgame is probably going to win the game, unless it comes down to a situation where somebody's just waiting out zone. If it's a 1v1v1 in solos, the last player to fight is probably going to win, especially in Zero Build, because most fights just kind of become you and an opponent trading damage. So when it does come down to those like slow kind of stalemate-y situations where nothing is going on, you do not want to force a fight with somebody unless you're very certain you can get the kill without investing much. You know, if you get good hammer beams on them and maybe you open up with 150 damage and then you can shockwave goo them, odds are you can probably finish that fight fast enough to where you can get out of there without investing like much of your HP at all, while also maybe catching the other player off guard, like the final player trying to third party you. Because if, let's just say you're player A in this scenario, you beam player B and push them and you kill them, but player C is kind of in no man's land trying to third party you because they think you're busy, you can catch them off and get the easy kill. But for the most part, if there's 3 players alive and 2 people fight, the player that isn't involved in that fight is going to win. And that applies to team game modes as well. So like if there's 3 teams left and 2 are fighting and then your team sets up the third party, you're probably going to win that. And unfortunately, most of Zero Build endgame, I feel like, is just avoiding third parties, especially this season with things like the Hunter Bolt Sniper in the game. It's really, really effective, and a lot of people play off that. And a lot of people kind of, that is their only play style, is they're playing off the Hunter Bolt. They're hiding in bushes, whatever. So play to put yourself in the best position. You can take fights if you think you can get the kill quickly and easily and without like investing too much. That's really what it comes down to. When you're taking a fight in game, how much time are you going to have to invest, and how much like heals or mobility utility are you going to have to invest into that fight? If you're going to have to invest a lot of time and a lot of heals because you don't have that much of an HP advantage, it's probably not worth taking, and you're better off just kind of living and letting the other people make mistakes, because a lot of people will panic and make mistakes when it comes down to it. But that is going to be it for this video. Lots of in-game is situational, and how you make those decisions in that moment is really what sets you up to win. If you guys want to see more on this, there's 2 playlists on my channel of me spectating players and the Inside the Mind series, where I kind of just like live commentate games and what I'm thinking and why. And I feel like those are both really helpful for in-game. Because of, like I said, every game is situational, it's hard to just make general tips that apply to in-game all the time. But those things in those videos, I kind of break down the situations and explain why I'm doing the things I'm doing, or why I think certain players should be doing what they're doing or not doing what they're doing in the spectating videos. And I feel like that is super helpful for in-game, because of, like I said, it just comes down to situational decision making. The more you play, the more experience you get in those situations, the better you'll get. But you need to just get fighting and get comfortable like playing the game of Fortnite. The more comfortable you are fighting, the better off you're going to be. As always, if you guys did find this video helpful or informative, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and comment down below which aspect of the game you think you struggle with most, whether it's early game, mid game, or end game. Interested to see that, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Because I was like kind of worried about doing that there, because if he runs to the NPC, it like would have been pissed at me. But I was just hoping I could kill him fast enough before the NPC became a problem. Like if he made it towards some of the blast damage I did to him hit the AI as well. I'm surprised it didn't. Like I figured it was going to, but like I was okay with that. 2 players remaining. One's on the balloon, one's a blob here. If we get a snipe out of this chest, that'd be ideal. The player on the thing should be an easy snipe. This blob player might be annoying though. Nope, he's got a snipe. This stinks for me, because the blob player got away, and now like I'm the only player that can be influenced by both players. Like the guy in the balloon is isolated, the chrome guy is isolated somewhat. But like both of them are like kind of naturally more likely to focus me, I feel like. But that balloon won't be in zone forever. Yeah. He made a rift from the AI. It is. But that's why that situation was problematic for me, because no matter what I did, I was like guaranteed to get third partied. Whereas like that guy in the balloon, best case scenario for him, he could snipe somebody, and then because he's playing off a snipe in an isolated location like that, he doesn't really give anything up. He's not going to immediately get third partied.